Welcome to the Meez Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Meez, the culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, I'll be interviewing world-class entrepreneurs in the food space that are shifting the paradigm of how we innovate and operate in our industry. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Yo, they say art mirrors life with every stroke of the pencil. I'm giving you folks a glimpse into my experience.
My guest today is a serial entrepreneur devoting much of her career to what we call good food at scale, which we talk a lot about today on the show. Kristen Barnett is the co-founder of Culinary Creators Worldwide, a multidisciplined media and marketing agency supporting food brands and creators. She's also the founder of Hungry House, an NYC-based self-proclaimed anti-ghost kitchen that partners with food creators and chefs to launch new food brands and concepts. And prior to this, she was the COO of this food tech company called Zuul, which was acquired by Kitchen United, which was a combination ghost kitchen plus delivery technology. And before that, she ran strategy, ops, and supply chain for the multi-unit fast casual spot Dig, formerly known as Diggin'. Having had the pleasure of getting to know Kristen over the last 5 years or so, I can tell you that she has an unbelievable work ethic and this steadfast commitment to that notion of good food at scale we mentioned before. Seeing the progression of her career manifesting this vision from agriculture when she was at Cornell, to restaurant operations and supply chain at Dig, to distribution and customer engagement at Zuul and then Hungry House, and now storytelling and helping others scale their culinary vision with Culinary Creators Worldwide has been really incredible to see. And among all that, she and I also spend a little time, a little therapy, if you will, talking about the ups and downs and the good and bad of being a founder today. So as always, I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. It is so nice to see you.
It's great to see you. Yeah.
I feel like this is just an extension, actually, of us, meeting up and having conversations all the time. So.
It's the same thing. Here we are.
Yeah. How have you been?
Been good. I've been really good. Yeah. Exciting things happening.
Yeah. We have a lot to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
I will sort of treat this just like one of our, normal conversations, but I'll tee up a few things that I was hoping we could make sure we dig into.
Yeah.
One, your background, because I started learning a little bit more about it. And even though you're now running a media and marketing company, I still want to talk a little bit about restaurants, and ghost kitchens, and technology. And then, of course, we'll dig into Culinary Creators Worldwide.
Yeah.
I'll say CCW moving forward.
CCW, yeah. Easy.
And then if we have time, I'd love to chat a little bit about just being a founder. Maybe we can do some co-therapy together.
Yeah. I'll take it anytime.
Okay, so you grew up on a nature reserve, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And I don't know much after that until you went to Cornell to study agriculture, not hospitality, which I thought was interesting. And then you went to the Boston Consulting Group. You were obviously at Dig for a very long time, running strategic ops and supply chain, things like that. Then you went to Zuul as the COO. Then you started a couple companies, which we're going to talk about. But that's my high level. Here's Kristen, but maybe you fill in the blanks a little bit and tell us a little about yourself.
Sure, why not? That's pretty much the bones of it. Grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, one stoplight, playing with salamanders in the woods, pretty much.
Stoplights,
and
not roundabouts. Interesting.
Yeah, just one stoplight. And I, from there, really wanted to expand out. I needed to get out, and ultimately, Cornell was the best way to do that. Literally visiting the college campus, it felt like a city. I thought it was a city. It, for me, felt so massive and awe-inspiring that I was obviously super thrilled to go. I originally was going to be an engineer. I was obsessed with math and physics and astronomy, and
wow,
all of that, building telescopes. And
what kind of engineer did you want to be?
I didn't really know. I wanted to explore it, but that was cut pretty short after going to the engineering school and realizing I wasn't going to interact with humans very much during the course of my studies. And so I thought, where else can I do math and use this skill that I have, but also interact with people and leverage that part of my skill set. And that obviously ended up turning me more towards business and economics. So I actually originally started in arts and sciences studying econ, but then transferred to the agriculture school where they have the undergrad business program. And so that was my path through there, and not in the hospitality school, contrary to what may seem like it would make more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I heard somewhere also that your favorite class was about grocery stores.
Absolutely.
So I actually am pretty fascinated with grocery stores in that I feel like they dictate how we eat in America, because you go to your grocery store and whatever is on the shelves is what you can buy. Obviously, Amazon changes that a little bit, but you still kind of are buying from the same sort of
and still like
digital
merchandising
aisles.
strategy to the same, the same extent.
What's your, like, any big takeaways from that class that,
Oh, I loved it. I mean, because it was this beautiful intersection of human behavior, design, and then the supply chain and sourcing and product innovation that all comes together in a grocery store, which is like such a ubiquitous experience. For me, whenever I travel, I love to go to the grocery stores and say like, oh, what are the cookies that they eat here? What are the flavors of Lay's? It's this, it's just this window into like, what are the local tastes and preferences? But also it's this forum that has a ton of power, as you said, around what we eat. So this was about like 10 years ago, I took this class, and it was the beginning of white label product creation that grocery stores were starting to innovate in. So we had people from Costco and the Kirkland brand coming and talking about the kind of power they had to create products that on their own as a company would just be doing massive amounts of revenue, would be like the next big thing. They just decided to make a chocolate covered almond, and suddenly it's like selling millions and millions of dollars of product. That was just really impressive to me. Not to mention that the other elements of understanding how Aldi and Stu Leonard's is designed, and that you are like forced to file through the aisles only one direction. And so you end up seeing all the products and maybe encountering different product categories and purchases, the one-off last minute purchases that you wouldn't otherwise buy, but you do with that type of design of the experience. I just love the class. I'm like a huge nerd about food. So yeah. It was definitely, I didn't know I was going to go work in the food industry so soon after that experience, but it was certainly something that reaffirmed my love for the industry.
Yeah. And now that's like ubiquitous now. Trader Joe's,
of course.
365
Wegmans,
from Whole
you go to
Foods.
Wegmans, most of it's private label. It's all white label. Yeah.
If I'm being honest, like we live in northern Westchester, so I'm not in the city anymore. And when we order groceries, because we have a farmer's market nearby, and we have like a farm called Hemlock where we get our meat. But a lot of times we'll order groceries from Whole Foods via Amazon. It's literally all Whole Foods products now.
Whole Foods branded product. Yeah, absolutely.
And I bet that most of them are, like when I'm looking at the Calabro mozzarella or Calabro, ricotta, and the Whole Foods ricotta, it's probably the same thing. They're probably just paying.
Definitely the same manufacturer.
Yeah. I've heard some horror stories actually about Trader Joe's. I mean, I love Trader Joe's, but I've heard that they make it really difficult for producers because, they just sort of monopolize a product.
Absolutely. And it's the same problem with Amazon Basics. You come up with an amazing new product that's a really ergonomically designed stapler. They're just going to make it for Amazon Basics and then push that product above yours in the search results. And so it's when you control the actual retail, like the actual platform, the marketplace, right? You can look at a grocery store as a marketplace, obviously. And, it's a tenuous existence for the independent providers within that ecosystem.
Yeah. I want to make sure we touch on that a little later when we talk about good food at scale, because I think we both have, some philosophies and interest in good food at scale. And I think that's a huge part of how we can protect ourselves in the restaurant business from that commoditization. But one thing I did want to ask, because I have a lot of friends that went to Cornell. When I worked at Tabla, it was pretty much all like just a wave of Cornell folks coming in with Randy Carudi and Will Guidera and JV, and this whole wave of them. Like, who are all these people? And they were all really good, by the way. Like, what is it about Cornell that like produces all these great like hospitality professionals?
In my perspective, it's the fact that
And you, by the way.
Yeah, well,
There you go.
I mean, but I wasn't even classically trained at the hotel school. I just am like
Yeah.
a fake hotelier at this point. It really originates from obviously the hotel school, and the hotel school is this sequestered island of hospitality obsessed people that make it as cool as it is an industry. And so you combine that with, I think, this like Ivy League education where everyone's already super type A. And then you have the intersection of food and beverage. You end up with these ultra dedicated, detail oriented professionals that have taken all that type A angst and directed it into hospitality experiences. And there are fabulous classes there that really give you this holistic understanding. And I think just like a depth of appreciation for what it takes. I mean, the students are literally running restaurants that other people on campus come and eat dinner at, and you pay and everything like it's a normal restaurant. And then they're graded for the quality of the food, the coherence of the concept, the quality of the service, the actual profitability of it, the revenue, the marketing.
Oh,
and
wow.
where else are you going to get that?
That's
It's
cool.
incredible.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, when your friend is like throwing the restaurant, they bring all their friends, you go, you reserve a table, and it's this perfect, it's this perfect testing ground for understanding whether you like the industry. And then if you resonate with the industry, you have all these tools to get way ahead that otherwise would maybe take many more jobs to understand really specific mentorship from a leader within one of those like high quality establishments, which you might not always get and is pretty hard to find in this industry. But instead it's truly like a pragmatic approach
That's awesome.
to
I had no
immersing
idea.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there sort of tentacles that feed off of that? That like, let's just say that you're in the hospitality school and you're in that whole ecosystem, and then it turns out like you love restaurant design or compliance or something. Are there other? I didn't go to college other than culinary school, so I don't know how it works. But are there like other majors for those things that spin off of that?
There's generally just the food and beverage like major that you can have, but you can go really deep within it in terms of your specialization. So there is a whole beverage track where you're doing actual alcohol tastings at like a 10 a.m. class with a professor.
Nice.
And the kids are like very buzzed coming out by 11:30 in the morning.
Hair of the dog class.
Yeah. And there's obviously the famous wines class, which everyone at Cornell takes and is actually a super valuable education on wine. But then there's advanced levels of that. There is kitchen design. And so you can kind of find it within it. It's really interesting though, because I go and lecture at the hotel school every semester. And
yeah, I saw that. How does that work? Are they requesting a certain thing to talk about or?
Yeah, I've made some relationships with professors. It all started when the hotel school organized a like professor immersion in New York with certain Cornell affiliated like hospitality businesses where Cornellians worked. And we had a few Cornellians working.
I didn't know that's what they were called.
Cornellians, sorry. So nerdy. You're going to have to forgive me here.
Cornellians, that's good to know. Okay.
There were a few of us working at DIG at the time. And so we had all these hotel school professors actually come to our headquarters and we gave them talks around what we were working on. And so after telling them about our supply chain initiatives and strategy, then they invited me up. And that was probably 6 years ago. And it's turned into this amazing tradition where I lecture in the service operations class. So how do you solve problems around throughput and service design to increase efficiency of your operation, to strategic management and supply chain? And I bring really the real life examples. Some of these classes, you'd be surprised, are taught through pretty theoretical or just a theoretical lens and are somewhat distinct from like what actually happens when you're running these businesses. And so I come with a lot of the real world examples of having navigated many of these problems in the professional world. And it is interesting because the hotel school actually generates a lot of real estate professionals and finance professionals. That there's a real estate major, there's really strong connections there. So I feel like partially it's my mission to go back as an example of a career that doesn't look like what you might originally associate with a F&B career, right? Where you think of, okay, I'm going to be working in kitchens. That might not resonate for everyone, but there is such a big world around food that I think the texture isn't always shown to students. Because when you're 18, 19, 20, you just don't know these things. And so I feel a responsibility to share with them how many exciting things are happening, be it technology, your world, media, ghost kitchens, food delivery, like the headquarters of these restaurant chains where there's amazing things happening.
Yeah.
All of
That's
that.
so awesome. I think one of the great things about going to school for something like hospitality, real estate similar is it's not abstract. It's not theoretical.
Yeah.
You can just go probably down the street and learn something. Whereas if you're studying, economics or business, it's very abstract and can be completely theoretical. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can have someone like you go in and very clearly say, no, this is exactly what happens and let's go see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Well, we were talking earlier about grocery stores and, like Trader Joe's or 365, or Amazon commoditizing some product that they think works well, which, look, is, I think, sometimes good for the consumer because they get it cheaper and faster. But I have a pretty clear stance on what good food at scale means when we talk about, scaling good food. And I've heard you talk about it a lot as well. I once heard you say that how you communicate the food and how you get it to your customers is what good food at scale is. But maybe you could sort of elaborate on that and we could sort of chat a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of good food at scale for me is really important because the only reason I work in the food industry is because of my own personal health challenges. And so it's something that's driven my career. I was working at the Boston Consulting Group, like a traditional business. I kind of start after Cornell and doing management consulting, which as a 22-year-old, you're like, really, what am I managing and what am I consulting on? It doesn't make a ton of sense conceptually. I'll totally acknowledge that. But you're like scraping data, managing presentations, whatever, and learning a lot. I ended up getting really sick with chronic Lyme disease. And I had been sick with it since college and been chronic and was relapsing, trying to do Western medicine. Ended up stumbling on an alternative like health program, raw vegan, traditionally treats cancer patients, but they had a Lyme disease program that was somewhat experimental. Went down for 20 days and had this miraculous recovery. Went from not being able to walk more than 2 blocks to walking without pain. And my infectious disease doctors literally could not believe the results. So I'd always known I was passionate about food, but this for me just really drove it all the way home. And it became really clear to me that where I wanted to use my brain power was not management consulting. It was solving problems that I cared about.
Yeah.
And that became good food at scale.
Yeah. I'm going to stop you for a minute because I want to talk about good food at scale, but that's super interesting because I want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
It sounds analogous to what I had a buddy of mine, Chef Seamus Mullen, on the show a while back, and he had RA, which I think he lived with it. And a very similar thing happened, and changing his diet and his lifestyle was the thing that actually allowed him to manage this. And you hear this in so many places, whether it's cancer and having sort of long-term fasting, helping with that, or what is it about food that has so much more power than any of these drugs or, whatever medicines that they're prescribing? Because clearly it's working for you. And maybe just a little for anybody that doesn't know, because Lyme disease is pretty geographically East Coast of America. And that's almost the only place it is. Like, what are the symptoms of Lyme disease and what do they typically do to solve it?
Yeah. Lyme disease is a pretty tricky illness, comes from a small bug called a tick on the East Coast, primarily in the Northeast. It started in Lyme, Connecticut. So that's where it comes from. And, traditionally it's known for giving you a bullseye rash, and that's pretty easily identifiable. But the data has now shown that actually only shows up in 30% of cases. So oftentimes you're going undiagnosed because you don't have any overt signs that you've been infected with this disease. And the symptoms can kind of creep up slowly. Traditionally, you receive a 4-week regimen of doxycycline, an antibiotic.
Yep.
But if you don't catch it and you have it in your system for longer than, 2 months, without any type of antibiotic treatment, you're at risk of it becoming a chronic illness.
So you got to catch it really
very
early.
unique. You have to catch it very early.
What's the diagnosis?
And so,
how do you know?
Diagnosis in terms of like how you actually find out
how do
you have it.
How do you know you have it? Yeah.
It's a blood test, the Western blot. But the problem is the CDC the testing is really antiquated. And so it doesn't actually catch the full spectrum of different strains of Lyme disease, as well as the other tick-borne diseases that exist, such as Bartonella, babesiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, many others. I also had Bartonella and babesiosis, which were like added to. It's a very complicated. It was like I got all these like Harry Potter spells of like illnesses in one little tick bite. So
nuts. So they give you antibiotics, and then after that, what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, you have to find a Lyme. If it's gone chronic, it's been months, and you've had like weird symptoms for months. You finally figure out it's Lyme disease. Usually, you also have to get it tested in a specific lab called IGNX. It's a process. Then you get your diagnosis. You have it. You have to find a Lyme literate medical doctor, an LLMD, because only certain doctors treat Lyme disease correctly and have been educated on it because it's such a niche illness. And then from there, the treatment is a combination of multiple antibiotics and antimalarials for anywhere between like 4 months and 4 years. You might even have to go on IVs. When I first was diagnosed in college, it was, do you want to drop out of college temporarily to go and receive hospitalization and an IV treatment because I had a very serious case? Or are you going to potentially have longer treatment, but still like keep your momentum in college? And so for me, it was obvious that I would keep my momentum going in college. So I stayed in.
Nuts. So, and then eventually you found this other treatment. It sounds like via food. What did they prescribe? How did you change your diet? And
yeah, it was very different than traditionally what you think of. Like, I'm going to go on a diet to improve my health. This was food is medicine, and it was a prescription. It was very much like, this is how it's going to work. It's raw vegan, so only uncooked fruits, vegetables, and that's pretty much it. There really wasn't anything else. For Lyme disease, you also have to avoid sugar, so I couldn't even eat fruit. It was purely just raw vegetables.
Gosh.
Green juice, a lot of green juice, like celery, cucumber, lots of wheatgrass shots. Even like a wheatgrass enema was prescribed. And so the theory is that we all have the natural ability in our own immune systems to fight off illness. But our immune systems in our modern society are so busy fighting off what are the toxins in our food. We're drinking alcohol, we're having high fat foods. We're just generally living more complex and somewhat toxic lives to a certain extent. And so they think like if you can reduce that burden on your immune system of digesting the food that you have and actually use that food and its nutrient density to empower your immune system to fight illness, you can see, incredible results. And that's exactly what happened for me. Because ultimately, chronic Lyme becomes somewhat like an autoimmune disease. And so you need to fix your immune system. And that was the program. It's pretty wild.
For how long?
20 days of that.
Oh, so 20 days. And then
20 days.
And then in perpetuity, are there adjustments to your diet that you've had to make?
Yeah, they give you, it's combined with a lot of education on how to do it. So I stayed raw vegan for the next 6 months. And then I switched to vegan with cooked food. And then years after that, I was able to work in fish. So I am primarily vegan plus fish, which I hear is called like veganism or something crazy. Huh. I just say I'm pescatarian now. But it's been an iterative process over the years, and obviously a big exercise and becoming more aware and in tune with my body. So I can tell, okay, I'm feeling a little sick or a little borderline with maybe some light symptoms. Go back to vegan and get some more rest. But it's, maybe you've heard this before then, like in your conversations with others, with RA, James Home, and like you just reorient your life, and it's around your health and your body and being in tune with that.
Yeah. Is there any instance of fasting that they incorporate into this?
Also fasting. 1 day a week we would fast. Yeah. Which I know is something you do. So
yeah, it's funny if I find that I do a 5-day water fast, twice a year, and then 3-day, at least 1 or 2 times in between there. And
Yeah.
The autophagy that takes place, where it's just eating all the bad mitochondria, like you feel so incredible afterwards. And
Yeah.
there's a lot more obviously science behind it, but there's so much, that value from it. There's this other Dr. Walter Longo that does a very similar practice for treating cancer patients. And it's so incredible how much food and what foods to eat or not to eat and when to eat can impact us far more than pharmaceuticals. It's just insane.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we've had all these tools the whole time, but it's so hard for people because our brains are wired from our evolutionary perspective to be geared towards sugar and fat and all the like unhealthy items that now proliferated in our society. And so you have to really fight against your own surroundings and have a really strong reason to believe that it's important to eat those foods and eat differently than what all of the signals around you are telling you to eat.
Yeah. Well,
for me, it's just been a great exercise and willpower. And I think, in reflecting, and we'll talk about obviously being a founder later, but I think it's helped me be a founder because I'm used to going against the grain. I was in college for nearly 2 years sober with everyone drinking around me. I generally find myself like questioning why things are happening and how it could be different, and have then like the fortitude to be able to take action against those ideas.
Yeah, which is really difficult. And really, we get it from all angles. I mean, at least in America, the pharmaceutical companies that they make far more money from you taking their medicine than from you just eating well. And then, sugar and fat are far more addictive than vegetables. Yeah. So the companies at scale will much rather sell things that are high in sugar and fat because you're going to eat more and buy more. So we have a tough job, to make sure that we don't get too far on any of the spectrum. So, well, that's a good segue to sort of wrap up this Good Food at Scale. I believe I've been on this sort of similar quest for a very long time. I started a fast casual, restaurant that tried to do the same thing, and I think it's part of what we need to do at Me's. But I think for me, Good Food at Scale is consistent execution of delicious food, and without like manipulating or like commoditizing farming or food production, and a menu that like can be prepped every day. You're not getting food in that is sent to you that's already done, and you just need to warm it up. And also like ingredients that can be adjusted based on seasonality and agriculture. I think these for me are like the formula of what Good Food at Scale is. And if you plug those sort of parameters in, it's tough. Most of the time what ends up happening is you do end up creating commodities or commoditizing a product and creating more of a vanilla version of something. And if we're able to do it without doing that, I think there's so much power. And I think you've been trying to do that with a lot of the work that you've done. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious how that resonates with you.
I completely agree. Good Food at Scale for me means the difficult work of understanding how to bring food from quality sources, from farms that are using great farming practices, from even knowing where it is, and the whole value chain associated with bringing it to where you are and ultimately consuming it. And then it's the preparation of it and having the care for the ingredient to really let it shine through. And all of this gets like exponentially more complicated when you add in the question of scale and accessibility. And so this is why, for me, working at Dig was such a valuable experience, because I saw and helped build and was in the weeds of the complexity of bringing this amazing, high quality, vegetable forward supply chain to life for a multi-unit group that was serving a pretty high volume of people every single week. And I think as I've continued to move through my career, it's understanding all the touch points that help us bring good food to scale to people, And there was a technology piece, and then there's the media and the storytelling piece, ultimately making people care about it, making it accessible through technology and how they actually can order and receive it. And then there's the foundation of like how it actually was sourced and how it's cooked. And so it's been this journey of understanding every single part of the value chain. I think the beginning was, to a certain extent, almost like naive, like, oh, we just need to build the supply chain and the food and the people will come. Then over time, it's then realizing like, okay, well, actually the online ordering really needs to work well. Like okay, cool. We have like all the amazing recipe systems and, training guides and the distribution center and overnight transportation and kitting and all that. Super complex, but also people need to know why it matters, and they need to know that it's available. They need to know that you did put all this care in sourcing it, because that's incredibly important for shifting a portion of their wallet towards your business, which ultimately goes back and shifts their wallet into those farms and supporting the producers and growers that are making this possible.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, as I keep going, the task at hand becomes bigger and more complex in terms of understanding how to actually make this happen.
This podcast is brought to you by Mies, the culinary operating system for food professionals. As a chef and restaurant owner for the past 20 years, I was frustrated that the only technology that we had in the kitchen was financial or inventory software. Those are important, but they don't address the actual process of cooking, training, collaboration, and consistent execution. So I decided if it didn't exist, I'd do my best to get it built, so the current and next generation of culinary pros have a digital tool dedicated to their craft. If you're a chef, mixologist, operator, or generally if you manage recipes intended for professional kitchens, Mies is built just for you. Organize, share, prep, and scale your recipes like never before, and get laser-accurate food cost and nutrition analysis faster than you could imagine. Learn more at www.getmies.com. Yeah, what I love about the trajectory we've seen in your career is you started, at least in the food business, right? You started after college.
Yeah.
How do you operate a good business, at scale? What does procurement look like for that type of business?
Yeah.
And then you sort of transferred into, okay, how do you now distribute that product to customers quickly? And that was with Zuul, right? So you started Dig, and then in Zuul is this distribution model. And then, okay, how do you create more of a unique, vision of each of these products with really incredible creators, which you started at Hungry House. And now you've sort of carried this on to like, how do you tell a really good story? Because I agree that's one of the most important and one of the most underappreciated necessities of any business is, great product without great distribution and a great story doesn't work. And all three of those need to be in play. And so is there a common thread between sort of Dig and then moving to COO at Zuul and Hungry House, starting that company and then starting this new media company? Is there a common thread there throughout those? Is it good food at scale? Is that the common thread, or is there something else?
I think so. I mean, it's the search to understand more and like be in the weeds of how it all comes together, which is exactly as you said. With a good product without good distribution, a good story, it doesn't work. You need all three for anything to be successful. And so as I've worked through my career, I feel like I've had this tangible experience in each part of the process of each part of this dynamic system. And I think what motivates me to keep going, well, generally I just am excited about new things and new ideas, and am maybe like slightly a workaholic, but also like generally just excited about the change in our industry. I found the industry that I'm passionate about and I want to make an impact. And so as I continue to combine these pieces, it feels like everything gets more rich. It gets more textured. It gets more complex in terms of and it gets more valuable in terms of the actual results that I can create with my teams that I have. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really do. I think I keep harping on this storytelling. Even in my career, it's been something that it takes so long to realize how important it is. I've always had in my head Reid Hoffman's, I'd rather have an okay product with incredible distribution as opposed to an incredible product with, mediocre distribution. But he forgets that piece about if people can't connect to why they want that product, then it doesn't matter. So you said something about, and this probably plays into not just Hungry House, but your new business, but honoring voices. I'm reading this quote now, by the way. You believe in honoring the voices that are using social media instead of restaurants, or that you feel that it's very important that we start honoring the voices of food creators in social media as opposed to just in the restaurants. Like, what's driving that for you?
I don't think it's so much of an either or, just that there are all these voices with amazing ideas about food, and there's tons of potential to help them build businesses and bring those visions for food to life. And so what's driving that for me is really this storytelling component that I feel like food is stories. And the restaurant industry in some ways has been a fabulous way of doing that because you have this captive, beautifully well thought out, multifaceted environment where you have a captive diner sitting, understanding the reason for that food existence, connecting with the team, and overall having a memorable experience, hopefully, right? But then there's this whole world of the content creators that have captured the hearts and minds of millions of people, creating food that is easy to make at home or really, really interesting or cooked in really rugged environments, like the videos of the guys who like are pulling rocks out of the river and a fire underneath. Those are my favorite videos. And I think we need to acknowledge how much that has become an important part of people's understanding of food and their interaction with it in their day to day, as all of us continue to be addicted to social media and our phones and our pockets. And so if that's the case, right, instead of fighting it and saying the only way to really, like, what's the only thing that's changing our thoughts and ideas about food is restaurants, I just think it's broader now. And so how can we play with food to impact consumers and their thoughts around what is quality, how do things exist, and why do they exist? And let me think a little bit more in depth around where I'm buying my food, why. And we have these incredible megaphones of people who've built these followings to work with and create projects of meaning and impact.
Yeah.
So that's my thought, is like, it's not an either or. It's a, whoa, this thing's happening. Let's leverage the creative potential here to also have an impact.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have like these mixed feelings. I don't know if they're mixed, but I have maybe a different or a slightly sort of divergent perspective. I do think it's really important, and it's very obvious that it's just, there's all of these creators now, and they are making food that people love watching. As a chef, I think about the craft of being a chef or a cook. And for me, it's not actually about the ability to make really interesting and delicious food, but the ability to actually make good food at scale, to be able to execute at volume every day with a team and getting them behind you to do it. And, you know, I think one of the things, it's similar to like starting a business, you know, lots of cooks have lots of really incredible ideas. The ability to execute those in a restaurant or any sort of food service setting where people can consistently get the same thing and also maybe not die because, you know, keeping things in a temperature,
that would also be good.
Temperature danger zone and things like that. I think that it's almost like these social creators. And by the way, some of them are just also incredible chefs. I saw recently this one, Notorious Foodie or something. I was like, whoa, okay, you just know right away, okay, that guy knows how to cook.
Yeah.
And then there's this guy, Chef Reactions, that I just recently heard about. It's really funny. Another good parody of, but anyways, I think that they become this really good plugin, which you sort of built in a way with Hungry House, you know, where like, hey, do you have really good ideas? Do you know how to talk to an audience? Are you really passionate about food? We have the other piece, which is how do you operate? How do you make sure that you're doing that safely? But I think that's essential. I think those creators, independent of having that sort of, you know, expertise and support to actually execute that food in a way that's manageable and operationalized and safe, is really, really important because, you know, as a chef, you can see anybody can make something incredible or really, really interesting. But how do you do that every day? That might have just been a rant, but...
Well, because my question back to you is like, for what purpose, right? Like, what is the goal? If it is like success is only the ability to actually feed people as the primary tool to inspire people around good food at scale, then yes, you could say like these content creators are like shortcutting and don't really know what it actually takes to do that, which is absolutely true. And it's also not their goal. Like their goal is still like cookbooks, it's media deals, it's brand partnerships, it's leveraging their online following. And so you end up begging the question of like, well, what is it all really for? Like, what is right? What is wrong? What is impactful? What is not? You know, a restaurant can serve, you know, let's say like 200 covers in a night, but a video could get 1 million views. And so you start to weigh like, okay, what is driving people's knowledge and understanding of food? You know, those 1 million people certainly aren't tasting it. They're not feeling it. They're not in the environment. They're not focused. They're watching the video for 30 seconds. But are they learning something? Maybe, hopefully. So I don't think I had like one like unifying idea around, and I don't think this is a discussion that is like one thing is better than the other. It's more of, okay, this thing's happening. We can't suddenly turn off the fact that there are TikTok stars that are taking up the brainwaves of these people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a yes and.
It's a yes
there's a
and.
difference between impressions and impact, right? You can serve 100 people and have far greater impact than, having a million impressions. But that said, you can also have an impact if you have really incredible ideas that, millions of people can see. That even as a chef, I might see something and say, oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about doing that. And it's from someone that isn't, hasn't been doing this. And so I think it's, to your point, it's all about what is the intent. And but also, like, if they're writing cookbooks, I hope there's someone else that's helping with, like, test those recipes.
Like being tested and validated. One would hope.
Let's diverge a bit so that we're not talking about that too long, but it is a really interesting topic. And it's, to your point, it's the faucet's turned on. It's not going away. That's happening.
Right. So what do we do with it?
It's also part of our responsibility as chefs to do that now. It's just, it's part of what we need to do.
Yeah, it's part of the job.
Yeah. So, okay. Culinary Creators Worldwide, which I did say I wouldn't say the whole thing again, but I'm saying one more time.
Here we go.
Now, from the rest of this podcast on CCW.
CCW.
What's the mission? What's the vision? Why'd you start it? Tell me about it.
Sure. What we're doing at CCW is really sitting at the intersection of food and beverage and the creator economy and technology. And it was born out of a very natural need that started to come into focus while obviously like running Hungry House. And so with Hungry House, we work with these incredible culinary creators who are using social media to promote the menus. But as you know, like Hungry House give them all the tools to be able to do that in a scalable way. We have a very clear recipe testing process with our amazing team of chefs. We have a very clear, content production process of, what's the brand look like? What are the assets we need? Where do we put it? All of that. And then what the promotion. So what started to happen was that larger brands, usually CPG companies, were coming to us asking if they could partner with us in a programmatic sense to leverage our creators for the purpose of promoting their products. And this got the wheels turning. Like, whoa, what we do actually is like creating a lot of value outside of our four walls than just like selling the food itself. We have this very distinctive approach to working with content creators in a kind of bulk fashion, multiple at the same time. We're really good at partnering with them on a project that has this experiential element. We're throwing parties. We're engaging their followers. We're essentially running these experiential influencer marketing campaigns. And we didn't even know it. Like, we were just doing that for ourselves. And brands were seeing the potential of it. So Culinary Creators grew out of that, saying, how could we take this further? And how could we scale up the value that we can create for brands that are clearly looking for a solution to their influencer marketing and experiential marketing goals? And so what we're doing and what the vision is really the ability to elevate these leading voices, these leading culinary creators, and helping, again, in a certain way, like provide a framework and structure for them to partner with brands in an authentic way and create really meaningful campaigns to share information and market the products to consumers. And these creators often need more resources and infrastructure than just their managers to do things. And quite frankly, I don't think that necessarily all these videos we've been talking about do create the most impact. It's just a video. And how many videos are we seeing in a given day? It's so many. So how do you cut through the noise? And that's often through a more creative idea, full campaign, an event, partnership. And we're really here to bring all of that to life. And yeah, we're really excited about it. I love
that. Yeah. I mean, you're almost like becoming the missing link, but bridging this gap between the creators and, all the other things that they can do to stand out and the execution of what they're doing at scale. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are some of these creators and who are you working with and who do you want to work with?
Yeah. So our first chef that we worked with was Alvin Kailon from The Burger Show, founder of Egg Slut, also has Amboy Quality Meats in LA. And that campaign was an amazing exercise and combining incredible IP from the burger show, Alvin's own social media presence and his connection to his followers who love him for the burgers and everything. It's amazing. And then partnering with brands in a really authentic, aligned way. We worked with Spam, which Alvin has loved since he was a child, and Square, which is actually the technology that he uses at his restaurant already at Amboy. So we brought all these pieces together to create a campaign, launching the burger show menu out of the Hungry House kitchens, producing all the content, connecting with influencers, et cetera. And I thought it was such a great example of what the potential is for us to do, to bring all these unique pieces together that any single creator, any single brand, it would be difficult, I think, to put all that together. We're now working with a celebrity-backed beer brand that is in a really incredible product, innovating in a section of the beer market. It's not launched in the US yet, and more news will come out about it, but comes from the UFC world and is going to be really exciting in terms of leveraging a massive voice for the sake of telling the story of this product that's been developed over many years in a really incredible way. And now we get to bring it to the world. So going forward, for us, it's that intersection of where these voices that have an amazing ability to bring a product to market to life. How can we create an ecosystem of support to see it to its fullest potential?
Love that. Are there any dream clients that you would love to work with?
We're working on a few of them that I think would be really exciting. Generally, our goal is to work with the really large CPG companies that we believe could see a ton of value through localized campaigns with really authentic connections to the right creators in a given market. We want to work with really innovative companies that maybe are bringing something new also to market. And we also see the potential to partner with the other direction, which is a creator who is launching a company and wants to understand how to actually fan the flames and leverage their voice as a creator, but then other creators to do something even bigger, which is kind of our current project, the beer project we're working on.
So cool. How is life different now for you as running this marketing media company versus restaurants and food tech and all that jazz?
It's pretty different. I mean, client services. And so for us, our goal is always to make sure that our clients feel informed and happy and excited about the work that's getting done in support of their goals. That's very different than being a solo founder of a ghost kitchen company that you're just putting out fires all day around, your employees not showing up or an order going out late to a VIP catering client to anything else that could happen. And it's a totally different flow and rhythm, which I think I'm still adjusting to. I'm obviously still very involved in Hungry House and work with the current exec team every day, but it's a different flow now. And I'm really excited about it. I think that it's more of a job of on the ground, like ops and execution, which my brain can happily exist in that place. And now really carving out the time to be creative and thoughtful around the ideas we're putting forth. And the difference gets made in the quality of the ideas, not in the speed of the execution, which ultimately you have to execute for the project, but the project is only as good as the idea itself. So I am enjoying stretching my creativity and I'm continuing to focus on that so that we can bring it on.
It's interesting that it's not often that someone is really good at operations and also really good at branding and marketing. It's not
it's a
common.
weird space to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I started to find it, Hungry House, obviously, I felt really passionate about our brand and the creators. And so it felt really exciting to start another company that would allow me to expand into that.
Yeah.
Because I also didn't know I had that necessarily in me until I realized I'm pretty passionate about making sure we get all the branding correct and the content and how it's going to be rolled out and telling the story. And then talking to other operators, I realized oh, wow, this is a kind of a unique part of my brain. And maybe I should go and really understand what's happening here and how I can leverage this, even more.
Well, I want to dive into some founder therapy But beforehand, maybe just because it's still sort of a hot topic. You still have Hungry House, which is kind of the anti-ghost kitchen.
Yeah.
What's going on with ghost kitchens and virtual kitchens right now? What's the state of the industry, as Kristen says?
It's a major inflection point is how I could best describe it. I think what's come to light is that the ghost kitchen side of the food tech world still ultimately has a lot of the underpinnings of restaurants, and technology can really only go so far in improving the margins and scalability of what is fundamentally very operationally and capital intensive business. Yeah. There is that, which is a challenge and a reality that I think in the excitement over the mass adoption of delivery in the pandemic was somewhat overlooked, because there were pockets that were showing incredible results and growth. But ultimately, when the flood of VC dollars kind of dissipates and you can see clearly again, the fundamentals that you're looking at aren't necessarily the types of fundamentals you would see from a tech company that would have raised a similar amount of capital.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. I think the other piece of the puzzle is that beyond just the operational capital intensiveness is also the margin profile of these businesses. And that already with the very, very slim margins, it's hard to take so many cuts of the pie, and everyone is fighting for their slice. And what ends up happening there is certain companies no longer become as valuable to their operators. And if the tech and the product isn't differentiated or high quality enough, well, ultimately, that value prop, it's diminished because no longer are you providing this new solution, but the market is maturing in terms of the food tech world and what's being offered to these restaurants. And so the virtual brands, their business came back. We have walk-in customers now. Where's the value prop? I think that you need to be really, really certain around the quality of the brand and ultimately what you're delivering to restaurants that you partner with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, nothing substitutes brand loyalty and the connection to a brand. You can't synthesize that. It's something that just happens by building a great brand.
Mm-hmm.
As more choices come about where I can have a virtual kitchen experience, or I can order on DoorDash, or I can walk to the restaurant or sit in, like that decision becomes a lot more based on what experience I want to have. What do I care about most?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I agree. By the way, what happened with Mr. Beast? What was the whole thing there with the virtual dining concepts and his thing? Was it like, did he sue them? Did they sue him? What went down?
I can't speak to the specifics on that.
I thought you were going to be able to tell me some more about this.
I don't think I'm not in a position to do that. I can't. I think generally though, like what has played out there is a general feeling I've had about many of the virtual celebrity-backed brands, which is that ultimately, structurally, there are challenges in execution, because these restaurant teams that are cooking your brand, that you're giving your menu, are busy, understaffed, and stretched thin on all regards. And then to take on another brand in addition with a team that might have already had a call out, regardless, even before the pandemic, staffing was hard. It's just a challenge. And so thinking through actually their ability to meet those brand standards day in, day out, everything we were talking about in the beginning, the challenges of that, when you're not actually invested as the owner of that brand, I think it sets you up to fail. And so obviously that's the most public example of something that went sideways clearly. But I think there is like the broader challenge.
Sorry, Kristen.
We have a visitor?
We have a visitor. Hi, baby. Yeah. Thank you. Those are for me? Wow. I'm in a... It's okay. Here you go. I texted you. But, thank you, babes. Those are my favorite cookies. Bye. I love you. Herbie, you want to go with them? Okay. That was my daughter. So she's not in school today. She did bring, actually, speaking of Trader Joe's, their Fig Newtons, or whatever their version of Fig Newtons are the best. Them,
like
by far. I don't know where it...
Joe's or whatever they are.
They're so freaking good.
They're so good. They're so good.
Well, it was nice to see her. I don't know if you probably couldn't see her, but Okay, well,
I couldn't.
I didn't know if maybe you had some more scoop on Mr. Beast than I would. I've only seen headlines, but let's get away from that now and talk about, maybe we could have a little therapy session here on founding. You've started a few companies. You've also ran a tech company as a COO. And I'll try to let this just be all you, and I'll listen. I won't complain or vent. For everybody out there listening, you've started a tech company, and you've started a tech/ghost kitchen company, and now you've started a marketing company. What are some of the biggest challenges and surprises you've had over the years starting these companies?
I mean, it's like too many to put in a succinct phrase.
Yeah, maybe because the top two, you're like, oh, when I think about starting a company, here's the two things that, two or three things that come to mind.
Oh, man. I mean, the two most obvious things are have co-founders, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's the most generic advice, but when you're a founder thinking about starting a company, you're probably already halfway off your rocker to even consider taking on that risk. And then obviously we're not the type of people that take a lot of advice, because people are probably advising us against doing that in the first part. And so you receive all this advice, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and co-founders are really helpful. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I want to move fast. People are going to slow me down. And I think ultimately that was a huge challenge with Hungry House for myself, just speaking really candidly and openly here. The sheer amount of information and tasks and work that comes onto your plate that only someone at the founder level can handle is unbelievable. It's immense. And I don't think I appreciated that. And the other element that was actually much deeper I didn't appreciate was the need to bounce ideas off of someone who's there with you. And having investors that you're close with doesn't really do the trick. Having your number 2 employee is certainly not the same. And so that level of being alongside you was something that I missed. And I think when you don't have that, every decision that goes well, goes poorly, goes sideways, goes fine, it can more easily become wrapped up with your perception of yourself. And because you don't have anyone else to point to, it really was just you. And it could have just been the business, the circumstances, the environment you're in, but ultimately also it is only you. And so I have struggled with in the past that identity blending of business outcomes and results and myself and my own feelings about how am I doing? Who am I as a human? So for me, entrepreneurship has been this wild spiritual journey, quite frankly, around the identification of the self as a separate unit from the business, from the day-to-day, the separation from workaholism and, my self-worth and need to always be productive and prove things to people in that regard. Because ultimately, I am just trying to create value, and I'm working on projects and putting it all out there to do that. And it's very easy to be very hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And so the co-founder piece has been critical for me. I have a co-founder for CCW. That's been an amazing experience. And it's definitely a recommendation I have to any future entrepreneur.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I had the same challenge at Mies, and you're definitely on an island. It's funny.
Yeah.
First time I've heard someone talk about the identity crisis, because there's a million things that you have to do, and you have to be an expert at so many things that, for me, being an expert at product and marketing and sales and customer success and accounting and finance and, building all of those things. And when any of them goes wrong, you gravitate towards, I'm not good enough. And you have to sort of, find a way to separate the two, compartmentalize them, and then identify the things that you're good at and that you love, your zone of genius, and then find ways that you can either let the other things burn or get other folks to do them for you. But that's obviously really hard.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, there's just not enough money to do that. I couldn't agree more. I think finding a founder that's also really tough. But there's so much advice about how to run a startup, and it's a marathon. And I think if for me, it always comes down to two things. It's one, don't start a startup. I tell everybody that don't do it. And then if I've told you that,
shouldn't do it.
And if I've told you that enough times and you still do it, then you should only do it if you can't not do it. And there's a million things that you won't do right. And there's a million things that you won't do as good as somebody else. If you can be steadfast in a vision and you actually have a vision, right? Where you actually believe in some vision of the world and you can be steadfast in it no matter what happens, and then have the strength to know when that's not there anymore, when you need to walk away. Everything else kind of, you'll figure out. But if you can't have that, I think that you'll just fail. If you forgot why you did it. And it's definitely like, there's so many now, these founder groups that I don't know about you, I'm a part of that have been helpful. How about fundraising? I mean, it's challenging for everybody, but any brain busters there for you?
I think that fundraising is a sliver of like the overall dynamic that you're talking about here, which is like the steadfastness in your vision, the steadfastness to continue to fundraise because you can't let it not happen. Like it can't not be that you don't fundraise. I don't even know if any of that makes sense. It really takes that type of dedication to move that process over the finish line and just to be incredibly resolute in the fact that this thing will exist and that you are going to find the right partners to help you build it. And it might take 20 meetings, it might take 120 meetings, but getting through that process is a matter of willpower, quite frankly. And there's like really no good way to do it. That's the most challenging part, is that it's like always hard. So in our marketing agency, we haven't fundraised. We're not going to a services business. And so I'm honestly thrilled about that because it's so distracting to fundraise and it's so hard because it's another job as a founder. And you, again, hear advice from people like us. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Well, fundraising is a sprint, and that is actually just the reality of it. A lot of other things in your life go out the window and you have to be maniacal about prioritizing to get that done. And it's challenging when you want to be in the business building. And so you have these like on and off times. Are you fundraising? Are you building? Are you fundraising? Are you building? I'm really excited to have a services business right now where we're focusing on building. And when we build more, we make more money, that funds the business more, and then we keep going. And it's this like ecosystem of that's like regenerating in a way, and a very different dynamic than the VC back startup flow of how you ultimately scale those companies, which you obviously have been in for a while, so you know very intimately.
I think there isn't a week that goes by where I don't get at least one or two folks reaching out about advice on how to raise money for their business or how to write. I think before anyone ever starts that, I always tell them like, think really hard about what kind of business you have, because that's going to dictate what kind of investor you have. I didn't fully appreciate the dynamics of venture capital versus private equity versus angel versus maybe corporations that invest in you versus, there's lots of ways in which you can, banks, things like that. There's lots of ways in which you can raise capital, but each of them has their upsides and downsides. And based on the type of business that you have, you can really hurt yourself if you aren't going to be focused on growth for the next 5-10 years and you don't want to become sort of an outsized return type of business. Venture might not be the right route for you because you have to make, big bets. You have to take bigger risks. Their expectations
are massive returns. They're investing across broad-based companies. They need something to go.
Absolutely.
100x.
And if you're early in the restaurant, let's say, and you want to scale and you have one or two restaurants and you want to scale that and you start talking to private equity, well, there's certain things that you need to know about that as well, because there's their expectations from them and unit economics that you might just not even want to actually think about yet because you're still building a brand and they need someone like you first to make sure that there's a lot of interest before they start scaling. So that's the first thing I tell folks is just like, be really clear about what, I just asked them when they ask, well, how should I raise money? And like, well, tell me more about your business. What do you want to do in 10 years? Is it a lifestyle business? Because then certainly don't raise money. So, well, we could go on for hours about that, but I want to close with anything else that you'd love to share about CCW and what folks should know about what you're doing, and anything else in general you want to share with the whole food world.
Sure. Well, CCW, I think that where we find ourselves is a creator-centric approach to full-service marketing solutions, and that modern marketing ultimately is shifting towards storytelling to create any impact. And so what I've seen from a lot of companies and why we're so excited about what we're doing is that they're caught between all these different service providers when they think about marketing. They have their experiential firm for one-off events. They have influencer marketing and social media content. They're working with independent, photographers, videographers to actually go and get that content. And they have a PR agency. And it's pretty disparate and, in our mind, inefficient. Ultimately, any work you do with a given creator might not then be reflected in experiential, and it could be a massive moment that's missed. And so we're looking to unify that and work with brands to create a more efficient solution for what they're trying to do. And any business of food and beverage, always down to talk to more creators as well, hear about their goals and what brands they're talking to, and whether we can help scale up their efforts in a way that means that they make more and the brand gets better results. That's really what we're trying to do. Like, ultimately, win-win-win. We love those projects. Let's make it happen. Let's make this thing bigger, better.
I love that. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. It's like, it's very siloed. The publicist will amplify a story that someone else has told usually, and someone else will then distribute that on social media, and then someone, so that's great. I love that you're doing that. Okay. Well, Kristen, this was awesome. And the last few times we've actually been able to meet in person, but it's so nice to see you remotely. And thank you for taking some time to be on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Josh. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.